Hey everybody, it's Jeff with Crashing the Pearly Gates. Very happy today to be joined by author and journalist Dan Good. Dan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
Yeah, same here. Here today to talk about that book that's right over your shoulder there, Playing Through the Pain, Kim Caminiti and the Steroid Confessions That Shook Baseball. Ken Caminiti is an interesting choice in character. What kind of drew you to wanting to tell the Ken Caminiti story?
Ken Caminiti was so fascinating, and as a baseball fan of the 1990s, I loved his style of play. I loved his all-out style. The dives at third base, that rifle throws across the diamond, switch hitting power. And I really appreciated too his honesty in coming forward and talking about steroids. And I just felt like his story deserved another look, deserved a new, fresh perspective. And it was just interesting to kind of go back in time and look at that era of the game.
Yeah, it was. We're basically the same age. So we kind of experienced the 90s through a similar lens, I would imagine. And yeah, when Ken Caminiti came out and he had his confession, that was a really, really big deal. And I think people are either forgetting how big of a deal that was, or perhaps they didn't live through it to realize how big of a deal that was. Is that part of the reason that drew you to this book?
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, you look at when this story broke, and it was on CNN. It was on CNN national news. It was leading, Middle East war. It was leading Catholic sex abuse stories. There was so much happening in the world at that time. And Ken Caminiti coming forward and talking about steroids was leading the charge on that. It was a huge story. And it really did change the game. I mean, you look at testing. Testing was a byproduct of the pressure campaign that Washington pushed on baseball after Ken and Jose Canseco started coming forward with their stories, because Jose Canseco started throwing out this 85% total a couple weeks before the Ken Caminiti story broke. So they both at the same time were kind of throwing out these accusations about steroids being rampant in the game. And Washington really pushed on Major League Baseball, and Major League Baseball and the Players Association really had to come to an agreement and agree to testing for the first time. And obviously at the beginning, it was a trial run. It had to hit a certain threshold in order to become actually put into place. And it was a blind testing done. So it wasn't supposed to be, we weren't supposed to know which players were coming out of testing positive, but many of them did. And it hit that threshold and it set up testing throughout the game. So it really did change things, but it was just a huge monumental moment. And it was huge because he had credibility. He had, the fact that he had nothing to gain from coming forward. He was just trying to get his life back. He was trying to get his life back in order. And for him to come forward and unflinchingly say, yes, this stuff helped me and I used it. I won the MVP award. It was massive.
Yeah, it really was. And I am about 70% of the way through the book. I'm getting to the point where the confession's coming up. And I got to say, I'm really enjoying it. A lot of times, biographies or anything kind of historical comes off as a textbook. This doesn't. That being said, we have a tendency in society to kind of label people one thing, and you get 2 to maybe 10 words to describe your entire life. King Caminiti was a lot more than just a steroid confession, and you talked to a ton of people. Realistically, I mean, how much research did you put into this book as far as time and years?
It's a lot. I mean, I started researching it in 2012, so a decade ago. I spent a year researching it. I just really thought his story was interesting. I had a lot of time to kill because I was working overnights, so I just had nothing to do during the day, and I was sleeping. And just really was drawn in by this story and felt like there was more there. And started calling people in 2013, and started kind of from the fringes. I didn't want to start going after, we'll say, a Bruce Bochy and, have him shoot me down. Then, where do I go from there? So I started with, some of the fringe people, the motorcycle developer who worked with Ken, and kind of worked inward from there. And it was just so interesting. I can't even put a total of the amount of time I put into this. I wouldn't even want to try to. I ended up interviewing 400 people for the book. And it was interesting because I think you go in thinking that the big names are going to give you the biggest information. And obviously some of them were very helpful, but a lot of times it was those guys on the end of the bench that really had the most interesting stories to share. And the behind the scenes people. I mean, there's so many different ways to dig deeper and find new stories. And it was really refreshing and interesting to find them and find people whose stories haven't been told in relation to Ken, and finding new pieces of Ken's life that hadn't been explored before.
Yeah, for me, you read a baseball book. I always like when you get the childhood friend or the drinking buddy, and Ken obviously had a lot of drinking buddies. I was a little wild in my 20s myself, but geez, Ken set the bar high there. But
Yes.
you know what? He was honest about it. He was open about it. He didn't flinch about it, which wasn't common back in those days. I mean, to talk about mental health. So he was kind of a pioneer in that way as well, right?
He was. He really talked about a lot of topics that are taboo or difficult for guys to talk about, for guys of that age to talk about. And it was meaningful, I think, for him to talk about those issues and try to find peace in them. But no, there was a lot that happened in his life. And you touched on this earlier, but he was a lot of things. He was complicated. He was a complicated person, and he was beloved, and he was awesome, and he was frustrating at times, and didn't do what people wanted him to do. And he ran the gamut, but he was such an interesting person. And I will say this, like all the time I spent working on this book, I continue to be drawn in by him. It wasn't like I got tired of him at a certain point. It wasn't like I said, I can't work on this, or I became jaded by him. I was really always just intrigued by his story and continue to be intrigued by his story and who he was.
Yeah, it seems to me, obviously I haven't written anything to your level, but it seems to me like one of the hardest parts of writing this book might have been deciding what to keep. It seems like there's probably a million great Ken Caminiti stories, but you also don't need to write a 900-page book on Ken Caminiti.
No, no, no. And it would have been great to include every single thing. And there was awesome stories that didn't make it. There was just little pieces. There was a story about Sean Estes and Ken almost getting into a fight in the 1997 game. And Sean had hit Steve Finley with the pitch early in the game. And as a retaliation, Sean got hit. He jogged the first when he got hit, and he just kind of moved on. Ended up pitching a great game. He pitched 8 innings, got the win. And after the game, Sean was out at the stadium outside with his parents, and he got a tap on his shoulder, and it was Ken. And he was worried that Ken was going to fight him or attack him or something, just because he was so imposing and threatening as a competitor. And Ken pulled him aside and was like, you pitched a great game. I was really impressed by what you did out there. And, congrats, keep up the great work. And it was one of those things that really motivated Sean early in his career as a rookie to be able to have that happen and have this experience and, appreciate the competitor that Ken was. And there were so many little stories like that I couldn't include or that were redundant. So I didn't include. I've included a couple on my Substack page, but there's so many stories that I haven't shared yet that I want to and will be, over the next couple of years. But it's just been interesting to piece it together and get all these stories. There's so many stories.
Yeah. Again, I'm actually genuinely enjoying the book. I'm not just saying that because you're on here. Matter of fact, if I wasn't enjoying the book, I wouldn't have asked to interview you. So one thing that caught my eye when your publisher sent it out, the title, Playing Through the Pain. And sadly, the Angels have a guy, Tyler Skaggs, dead from opiates and the guy selling in the locker room. These guys, they'll do just about anything to stay out on the field, won't they?
Yes, they will. They will. And I think that's the honest reality that we need to face and the honest conversation that teams and players need to have with each other. They will do anything to stay in the field. I mean, Ken took anything he could to stay in the field. Even drugs that weren't healthy for him, street drugs, performance enhancing drugs. The Skaggs situation is tragic, just as Ken's story is tragic, and they both have a lot of parallels with, I would say, enablers or people around him who maybe thought they were doing what the player needed or wanted at the time, but wasn't good for them. And it's difficult. It's a difficult balance to try to piece together everybody's responsibility. But I do think that it's important for people to be vigilant, because I look at Ken's story and there were so many people around him who tried to help him, teammates and coaches over the years. Some didn't know how to help him. And then some struggled and didn't really know what to do. And then you had other people around him who would be, letting his bad impulses continue or fuel them, allowing him to take drugs or drink or do whatever else. And sometimes they didn't know any better. Sometimes they legitimately didn't. Other times they did know better and just, hey, this is fun. This is great. Let's have a great time. And I think there needs to be more vigilance around everything and the recognition that these players will take anything to stay on the field, to dull the pain, to come back from injuries, to do whatever it takes, or to, calm whatever is inside of them. And it's a sad thing, and it's a realistic thing that I think every team and player needs to assess and keep in mind.
I'm right there with you. I know there's a lot of whataboutism in the world, but when Caminiti came forward with his steroids confession, it was like, wow, if he did it, I wonder who else is doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I would be willing to bet that there are plenty of pain pills floating around most, if not all, major league clubhouses. Not to get away from your book, but Ken, not to give too much away from the book, but Ken started taking steroids because he was hurt, not because he was trying to hit 50 home runs.
No, exactly. I mean, he was really diving into that steroids regimen to stay on the field because of his shoulder injury. I mean, if he couldn't play, he was staying off the field, and his steroids were a way to help him bounce back from that injury and to stay strong. And I mean, he was an all-star before he started taking steroids. I think people need to keep that in mind. I mean, this isn't like this guy was barely a major league player and he took steroids and he became the MVP. He was an all-star already. And I don't think he took them to get that good. I don't think it was expected that he would become that good. I don't know that anybody knew that he had it in him to be that good, that he was in 96. I mean, his MVP season was amazing and so far beyond anything that he had done up to that point. Even, going back to his minor league days, he had a great second half and early first half in 1986 and early 1987 that hinted at the possibility that he could be this kind of player. But the power numbers that he put up in 1996 were far and away beyond anything he had done before or since. And even 95, late in 95, he started really hitting a bunch of home runs too. And I think it's that self-fulfilling, like you start doing it and it works, then you say, okay, I'm going to keep doing that. And I think we all do that for everything. If you have a day at work that's really good and you have a couple cups of coffee and you have a great day at work, you're like, okay, it's the coffee. I need to keep taking this coffee, drinking this coffee every day. We find these boundaries and these opportunities for ourselves that we want to perform our best and we want to keep performing our best. And it's a really tough thing for major league players or anybody when we start to slip, to decline. We're not the same person or player we used to be. And then you try to offset that any way you can. And I think his steroid use was a really big way, in a really big way, a means of offsetting the declines, the injuries, all the issues he was facing. And obviously it worked really well for quite a while. And then it had that opposite effect of he was taking too much and it was too much for his body and his body started breaking down from it.
Yeah. It's definitely a wild ride. I definitely appreciate the advanced copy that you guys sent over to me. I'll probably be done with it by this weekend. I got a 4-year-old at home, man. So
it's tough. It's tough. I get it.
It's tough. But when does the book officially get released?
It's coming out May 31st.
So it's coming out May 31st, and it's going to be on all of the major retailers, right? Or is there any place in particular you want our readers to go to?
It's available everywhere that books are sold. Obviously Amazon's the big one, but I know that people have problems with Amazon. And so, no, it's available literally everywhere. I hope it's available at your bookstore, online, anywhere you can find books.
Nice. And yeah, I'll ask your publisher for a link when it comes out, and we'll put it on the site. But there are a lot of baseball books out there. I think you've done a good job of turning this into a story of a guy who went through a lot: substance abuse, mental health, PEDs, and all that in the context of baseball, and kind of describing how the pressures and aspirations of baseball or a pro athlete in general kind of played a part into that. So yeah, I would definitely recommend the book, and I appreciate you for coming on here. Do you have another project in the works that you might be publishing?
No, and that's what's kind of funny. I've been working on a lot of ghostwriting projects, book ghostwriting projects, and I have them in different stages of publishing. So it's kind of been, I've been doing so many different projects since I finished the draft on this book, that I don't necessarily have one specific thing, which I'm happy about. Ultimately, I'm going to be publishing again, and I'm going to write another book, but just kind of, it's got to be the right topic, and I don't think I can spend a decade writing the next one, but it's got to be something that I can really dive into and be excited about each day. And like this one was, and I don't know if I'm going to find that. So it's going to take some time to find the right topic.
Okay, well, when you do, make sure you circle back. I'll put a link to your Twitter on there as well. We really stick to baseball, not politics. So I'm going to throw a warning out there. Dan covers both baseball and politics on his Twitter. So if you love it or don't love it, it's not my fault. But I really appreciate your time, man. And thank you for coming on here.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.